time. It's our time, my friends. Time for millions of maturepreneurs, 55 plus, who are hashtag not done by a long shot, to revolutionize how we lead, do business, and innovate our world. I'm your host, Jeanette Anderson, and welcome to my conversations with fascinating people who would rather inspire than retire. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of the Maturepreneur podcast. I am your hostess, Jeanette Anderson, and today I have the very bright, shiny, lovely, delightful Ande Lyons with me. And we are just connected recently, but I got to tell you, this woman makes me smile every time I see her and talk to her. So I am bringing you guaranteed smiles in this podcast. So welcome, Ande. I'm glad you're here.
Oh, Jeanette, I'm so thrilled to be here. And listeners, viewers, I'm waving from Boston, Massachusetts.
Yes. And if you can't see, if you're not watching this on our YouTube channel, you can't see she's got a bright, beautiful, orangish kind of red background and tons of color, and it's lovely. So it reflects her colorfulness. So that's one of the reasons to go watch the YouTube channel, by the way, under Maturepreneur Network, I believe. So let me tell you, as usual, I'll tell you the official word, then we're going to find out the juicy, really good details behind the scenes and rock on our topic of really diving into a wonderful conversation about making a difference at any age, but especially at this age, and how to really find what that is for you going forward. So Ande Lyons is a 4 times founder, a former global startup mentor, serial podcaster since 2012, and currently the host of the popular Don't Be Caged by Your Age podcast, where Ande helps folks dissolve internalized ageist beliefs so they can thrive after 65. Through conversations with individuals who have defied societal norms, shattered age-related expectations, and forged new and unexpected pathways that left them feeling enlivened, engaged, and visible. Ande helps listeners reimagine, repurpose, and rewire their lived experiences for a vibrant life during their Renaissance years. Ooh, I like that phrase. I'm surprised I didn't come up with that earlier or think of that earlier. Talk about the new Renaissance and so forth, but that's great. That's brilliant. So welcome. And let's dive right in and find out something about you that we wouldn't guess from reading your bios or your website or whatever. And I always tell people they get bonus points for it being really juicy or unexpected. So what would people not know about you?
Well, a lot of people would not know that when I graduated high school, I did not go into college. I went out west for 6 years. I call them my Wonder Bread years, where I grew in 12 different ways and saw society and all the fragility of humanity. I was a bartender at a country rock bar for several years, and just, it was really harrowing. I'm so happy I survived. But most people in my economic background and where I was raised as an old Yankee here in New England, went on to college and did all the things. And so I rebooted when I turned 25, went to Catherine Gibbs Secretarial School and began working for founders, for entrepreneurs. Right outside their door, the executive assistant. And I always called it my boot camp training, right? I got to sit out there, whether I was taking shorthand and typing 90 words a minute or, getting coffee, but also participating in all the meetings and seeing how they raised money, how all the departments worked, what was important about marketing and accounting. And then IT came into the world in the 80s, right? And so learning about all the technology while being the executive assistant to always a man who was growing a business from an idea he had to a revenue producing profitable entity. And from there, I learned, and I was going to night school, trying to get that 4-year degree at night. And what I heard and learned was was an all women's MBA program here in Boston called Simmons School of Management. And what happened was two deans, Jeanette, women, female deans at Harvard Business School, both with PhDs, were teaching and realized none of the case studies were for women in leadership roles. This was in the 70s. The semantics, like the one or two women who would be in the room, were always shut down by the men. And they just, Y and X chromosomes don't always, they may be addressing the same issue, but they're not talking the same language. And so they first went to Wellesley to say, hey, can we set up an MBA program? Wellesley was like, I don't think so. So they went to Simmons, which was founded in the late 1800s, right after the Civil War, actually, to help women get a vocation to take care of their family because their husbands, brothers, fathers were killed in
Mm.
the Civil War, and they needed to be able to provide for their family. So this is an educational institution still around today that gives women the opportunity to learn and get into a vocation, a profession that is meaningful and worthy, and they can provide for themselves and their family. So they launched their MBA program there, and I got to go there. And what they did, just a little nugget, 1% of the uh, class that was onboarding could be what they called non-traditional. And that's a student that didn't already have an undergraduate degree.
Ah,
Now, this is all going to scroll around to how we have to find different ways to get to yes in our lives, right? And I knew I wanted to do this. I knew I'd be a good fit, but of course I was frightened. And I knew that I was terrible at standardized tests. And you have to take the boards to get into a graduate school, especially an MBA. It's called the GMAT. And so I went to night school, like triple 3 semesters in one for accounting and for algebra, so that I could prove that I had a critical brain and expository writing. And then I thought, well, why don't I go and take a statistics class too? So I did that. And sure enough, they first told me, Andy, we don't welcome students with GMAT scores as low as yours. And they told me that not once, but twice, because I did it again just to make sure. And I was still just as lousy. I said, yes, but I have straight A's in all these other classes. And they're like, okay, well, if you get a B plus or better in that statistics course you're taking right now, you're in. And I thought, oh my gosh, I needed to do statistics to see what I had to get on the final to get that grade, but I did it and I got in, and it changed my life on so many levels. And it also taught me how to get to yes in non-traditional ways, because people will tell you no all the time. And you have to step back and say, how important is this dream? How important is this initiative? What kind of work am I willing to do to reach it? And what's another way to get to yes?
yeah, that I love that, and being someone who advocates and is committed to a yes life and creating yes lives. My origin in entrepreneurship was when I was very young, and my mom. I wanted a book, well, a very short story, and essentially after begging for quite a while, she turned around and said, "No, we can't afford it." And I remembered the moment. I was 5, and I remember it, Andy, because I remember the look on her face. I don't remember most of my childhood, but I remember this moment very viscerally because it set me on a path. And that path was, I looked at the look on her face of shame and anger and frustration and sorrow and despair. And I remember deciding right then, even though I was 5, I never wanted to see that look on another person's face.
Oh,
And I
so
wanted them
beautiful.
to have yes lives, not no lives. And that became the impetus behind everything I did, my entrepreneurial direction. I ended up having a little business in order to buy that book because, like, no was not an option. And so I love hearing when people talk about creating yes as an option and how to think about that differently, and come at it differently, because we do get so trained to get thrown off by no's, especially no's from authority figures. And
Right.
the system, well, we can't do that because that's the policy, or that's the system, or that's the whatever. It's like, but that's all created by people. How do we make this work? Right. So I,
That's right. The answer is always no, unless you ask or you find a different way to get to yes. And, it's so easy to get discouraged. And once you understand that discouragement and uncertainty is part of the journey to finding your dreams, or, feeling fulfilled, then you can navigate it better. You can say, oh, that's part of the journey. right? Just kind of like I've got to stop to get gas when I'm driving 800 miles somewhere. That's part of the journey.
Yeah.
You know, you have to have these stops and moments that can be challenging, a flat tire or whatever that looks like. But you know, this human journey is not without adversity. It's understanding that with that adversity, there's always a golden seed of opportunity. Thank you, Napoleon Hill.
That person made a big influence on a lot of people. So speaking of influences and what motivates us, what is your why? Why do you do what you do? What's your purpose, Andy?
Well, my purpose has always been to enhance
Mm,
people's lives. I grew up in a home with a narcissistic mother, and so I saw what it was like when, as a scapegoat, when you were invisible
mhm,
and what that feels like. And I thought, I never, like you with your mom, right? I never want anybody to feel invisible. What can I do to shine a spotlight on them, enhance them, while I'm also fulfilling my own needs and desires to be fulfilled? And so that's always been my why. And I'm a fierce problem solver, which I think is probably the number one ingredient in most founders. I've interviewed hundreds of founders. I had a monthly pitch event here in Boston for startup founders for 3 years. And I can say as a fact, the data proves founders are problem solvers that want to solve a problem. And so that's another thing I love doing.
mm,
And so that helps me get up every day and have purpose. And I can't imagine not having purpose. And this is why retirement has become an epidemic, according to the World Health Organization, in societies like the US, Canada, Australia, UK, because we tell people at a certain age, you're done. We tell people that ambition has a deadline, like, you know, no, ambition is ageless. We tell people we don't need them anymore. And when people retire, they find themselves being sent out to pasture, and humans are not horses. We do not deserve to be in a pasture. We need that purpose, but our purposes change as we age in different stages and ages of life. I like to use the ikigai Venn diagram. And I don't know if people know about ikigai. It's a Japanese term.
the guy, and
And so you take four circles and you put them together, right? Overlapping. You've got that circle, that little tiny circle, the sweet spot in the middle. But what it is one circle is called what you love.
mhm,
And in that circle, there's some passion, there's some mission. And then another circle is what the world needs. And in that is part of mission and vocation, right? What you're called to do. And then another circle is what you're good at. So that's passion and profession, right? And then the final circle is what you can get paid for,
mm,
right? And so you put all that together in that right there, that sweet spot where you're serving the world, you're feeling the passion, you're on mission, you've got your vocation, you've got your profession that you've been honing over the years, right? And it's all come together in the middle. Most humans need that to get out of bed in the morning.
exactly.
And when we tell them, no, you're not on purpose anymore, health declines, mental health declines. And now we have a serious health epidemic with
Mm,
an older population that's not feeling worthy, valued. They feel invisible. They feel like they're being warehoused. We do not want that. We want to wake up every day feeling that we're contributing, right?
exactly. And that we matter. You know,
Yeah.
my why statement or my purpose is that I want you to get that you matter and live like you do.
Yeah.
And that's a big part of this whole, mission that I'm on with Maturepreneur World. And what I really hear from you as well is that whole passion for supporting people and understanding that they matter, that they make a difference. And there is no, like you said, expiry date on that. As
Right.
much as society would have us think that there is. In fact, I think the amount of contribution expands as we get older because we have more to offer, more wisdom, more experience, more expertise, more context. And yes, we may have a little less of some things, tolerance sometimes, or well, what I was thinking of is tolerance for BS. We have lots of acceptance and tolerance, but less tolerance for
Yeah, we're much more discerning.
discerning. That's the word I'm looking for. Yes. So tell me a little bit about your journey in terms of you've done a lot of different things. So you went to school, you got your MBA despite the odds and despite the system. And then what? What did you do?
Well, and then I went into banking, not because I was a fit, but because I wanted to do financial analysis on companies. That's what you do when you become a commercial lender, and to understand how banks worked and thought, and also to add credibility to my resume. And so I lasted 3 years. And then since 1992, as I like to say to people, hello, my name is Ande. I've been unemployable since 1992. It's, yeah, I've had my own businesses since then, can be service consulting to, a heavily VC backed.com to a food manufacturing business I scaled in less than 2 years, nationally scaled. And then some other platforms, some little small tech company platforms, and learning a lot along the way, always growing, but also raising my children and our children. And that was important to me. I'd had a loss in each trimester. And so being able to be a hands-on mom, but still, run a business, right? Not report to anybody was also very important to me. And over the years, and I have to tell you, the first time I had a video camera was probably when those heavy handhelds came out in 86.
Yeah.
I thought, oh, the camera loves me. I need to be doing this. But I didn't think it would take, it took what, 30 more years before I could go and do live streaming and podcasting and all those things. So I always say I waited. This is what I really wanted to do, is to be able to talk to that camera and talk into a mic. And so I'm glad the technology made it so I could do it from my office at home.
Exactly.
But so over the years, always helping, always mentoring, and always adding value, making sure people felt seen. That was always so important to me, so that they were really seen for the light within them. And then I wrote a post when I turned 66. I wrote a post called "Don't Be Caged by Your Age" on LinkedIn, and it went viral, Jeanette. And I was shocked. But I talked about it. I started off saying, hey, when I turned 50, I thought that was it for my entrepreneurial days. That's a young person's game. I'm done. 16 years later, I had already had two more businesses, right? And mentoring global founders. But what I kept hearing at pitch events, et cetera, were folks saying, well, describe your business as if you were describing it to your grandmother. Never grandfather, by the way, always grandmother. Gendered ageism, that's called. So I got one of those. In the US, we have this Route US 66, and it has this really great, in the white, almost like a triangle sign. And I got that off Amazon, held it up in front of me, had my photo taken, because I wanted to come out about my age. I was tired of folks saying that about grandmothers. And I would always, raise my hand and say, I could be your grandmother. Yeah, but Ande, you're a lot of fun and you're this and that. Okay, great. But do you see what you're doing? Right. We have been building tech companies and coding since the 70s. That's 1970s. Okay, folks. So we're very familiar with technologies. Stop making us out to be dumb, right? And inadequate and unable.
Yeah.
And so I held that sign up, but I was still so afraid to come out about my age, Jeanette. And you can see it in the picture. It says, my face says, will you still love me now that you know I'm this old?
Right.
But what it started percolating inside of me was this: why aren't we aging out loud and proud? Why are we admitting I'm 68, right? Instead of going, I'm 68.
Yeah.
Like, yeah,
Yeah.
I'm 28.
Yeah.
Whatever. It is an age.
Yeah.
And why do we have to hide it, especially women? And it's because we're told every single day, "Ooh, you're not young anymore. Ooh, you don't reproduce anymore. Ooh, that skin, that can't be happening. What's going on there?" And so, for now, from that article to June of 2023, I realized I wanted to shift my energy toward not hustling and bustling and hearing all the hustle bustle stories, and mentoring, but really focusing on the podcast community and bringing about this podcast called Don't Be Caged by Your Age, where I focus on shattering
Mhm.
ageist beliefs and stereotypes and expectations of what folks are supposed to be doing as they age into 60s, 70s, and 80s.
Yes, exactly. I love it, love it, love it, love it. And I appreciate the work that you're doing because there's so much ageism that is both within our own heads. Like there are, when I started to read This Chair Rocks, A Manifesto Against Ageism by Ashton Applewhite, I was shocked at how much ageism I had within me. I
Yeah.
didn't realize that I did. It's so insidious and subtle in our society at
Yep.
times until you actually go and do things like try to get a job. Good luck. I've got a great friend who's 61, I believe, maybe 62, absolutely qualified, has and has a great resume, as evidenced by the fact that she's gone on 27 interviews,
Right.
27 that she's qualified for and shortlisted, and she hasn't gotten a job. Not because she doesn't interview well, she does, she's a pro, but purely because they find out how old she is when she gets there. So that's a big
We have a lot of work to do, work
challenge.
with institutional
Yes,
ageism, and it's going to happen. They have to dissolve it. They have to reframe it because they're not going to have the workforce that they need, A. And B, once they understand the power, both bottom line for revenue and profitability, as well as innovation when they bring intergenerational employees together, my gosh, somebody in your friend's age can figure out things so much faster because she's already made all the mistakes. The
exactly.
30s, 40s, and 50 years old are still screwing up
Yeah,
and they don't know what they don't know. She already knows. So she brings that, and you couple that with someone younger who's got new eyes, new fresh, new whatever, and you bring that, you are going to have a much more powerful bottom line
exactly.
for, you know, employees, for investors, et cetera.
Okay, so Andy, you used to work in the banking institution. This boggles my brain. Exactly what you're talking about right here. Currently, boomers hold 79.5% of the wealth in the US, which is trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars. And yet, when I go to banks and talk to them about the maturepreneur workforce and how they are wanting to start businesses and so forth, and how there are no loans available, no business insurance available, et cetera, they just kind of look at me and tilt their head like I'm crazy. And really, truly, at least
Yeah.
here in Canada, they are just cottoning on to women as a market. Like they are just starting initiatives for attracting women, and creating products for women. Why are they not more bottom line oriented? This is an affluent market, highly motivated, has the money, more money than any demographic ever
Well,
had.
and
And
they'd be fine if you gave a personal guarantee, but they're not going to give it to you just on the basis of your business
right,
being able to support that.
and that would be the case for most entrepreneurs at any age in most banks, but they don't even have them on their radar. Like they don't have any products or for them or whatever.
Look, they're dinosaurs. They're like the bookstores when Amazon was taken off.
Yeah.
They're like Blockbuster Video, right? I mean, there's the perfect example. Netflix was really bringing things forward, and they were like, "Yeah, well, whatever. People are going to still want to rent." No,
So
banks. I am trusting that there will be other funding vehicles coming forward. But again, the ageism is also what you're running up against. You're running into insurance. You're running into lending money to someone who they think is going to kill over and die any minute or is too old to be doing what they're doing due to their ageist beliefs, due to their regulatory requirements. It's very discouraging, and I am looking forward to seeing businesses that will understand that and become financial institutions that will leverage our ability to be contributing humans past the age of 65 and not have to rely on our 401ks to do that.
exactly. Well, and the reality of the situation statistically is that if you hire a boomer or if you loan to a boomer, they are more likely to be engaged and loyal and working hard,
And show up on time.
show up on time for 10 to 20 more years. That
Yeah.
statistically is the case right now. versus a millennial who typically stays with an organization for 2 to 2.5 years statistically before they move on. And even when they start businesses, they tend to rotate out of them much faster. So it just is boggles my mind that the logic, statistics, and proof hasn't and money, the bottom line, hasn't filtered through yet. But
Well, and Jeanette, can I just add on to that? This is one of my pet peeves. They're okay with the Gen Z values, meaning Gen Zs are really good and the young millennials at having what we would call a work-life balance. They are about, yeah, I'm going to be here for 8 hours. I don't need to do this hustle grind stuff. You might saw it suck the spit out of my parents. I'm not doing that. And companies are like, okay, so we'll work around that. You can work from home 2 to 3 days a week. You can, all this work around. They bend over backwards to work around the
yeah,
20 and 30-year-olds' needs. Why can't they do that for the boomers?
yeah,
Boomers don't need to work more than 20, 25 hours because they can get done a full day in those 20, 25 hours because they are so darn experienced. Systems and procedures in their back pockets all the time. So I'm curious as well, and looking forward to the institutional. I really believe that it's going to change because people are going to be taken to court. So we have the AARP Foundation. We've got some law firms who are doing phenomenal work. Raytheon, right around the corner from me here in Massachusetts,
mhm,
would not hire engineers or were laying off their engineers that were over 50. No, they got taken to court because they were hit with age discrimination again and again. They weren't making the changes. Fine, we'll make sure you make the changes. This is how it works. One of
mhm,
my favorite stories for women, JP Morgan. A lot of women were getting up into the close to the C-suite, EVP, VP status, still getting paid 79 cents to a dollar a mail mate.
mhm,
And JP Morgan, not going to change that. So they took him to court. And
mhm,
now women are only 1 penny off from
mhm,
equal pay with men.
yeah,
But, lawsuits, well, there we go. That's using the court system in the right way.
yeah,
I don't see how else we're going to, until, more women of age
mhm,
understand
yeah,
that. And I do see in the Gen Zs, they love the older generation. Oh my God, my biggest fans in the startup ecosystem were all under 30, couldn't
mhm.
get enough of me. And I'd be like, what? So, they don't have the same skewed perception. And then we also have some women, and folks out there who are really uh, dissolving those barriers. I shared a reel of this woman named Ruby, who was a substitute teacher at the age of 95.
Mhm.
And, so those kids who are seeing her are going to say, oh, that's what I can do. Right.
Yeah,
And look
exactly.
how vibrant and alive she is. So that's why we have to keep doing all this representation.
Exactly. Well, and I think, I'm hoping that people will catch up soon to the fact that it used to be we retired at 65, died at 75, but that's still 1940. That has not been the case for a long time. And people being born right now are supposed to be living to 130. So 65 is barely middle age. So I think we need to start shifting some things. But let's talk practically for people out there, because you have been a founder a number of times. You have gone through the process of growing an organization. For those out there who are listening, men and women, what is the best advice you would say if they wanted to become a founder and start an organization, not necessarily a side hustle or a
Yep.
solopreneurship or a small business, but they actually want to grow a
Yep.
venture point? What do they need to think of most?
Join an accelerator, apply to an accelerator program.
Okay.
And accelerator programs, you can find many that are free. What this does for you, many are 12 weeks to 9 months long.
Mhm.
And they take, first of all, you're surrounded by peers, other people who have come up with an idea and want to launch a bona fide business where you might have hard assets and you have to manage inventory. It could be SaaS, software as a service, whatever that looks like. You're going to have your head of tech and engineering. You're going to do all the things to build your business. And this way you get into the mindset of a founder, of an entrepreneur. When you have never delved into this area or navigated entrepreneurship, you are coming, and rightly so, from the indoctrinated behavior of an employee.
Mm,
And so what has to happen is you have to start shifting from how employees are rewarded, what they look for, and that mentality to owner mentality. And that's an important shift. And an accelerator program, you can get virtual, you can maybe Techstars is a good fit for you, but you try to get those. It could be a local university, get those folks on board who understand the entrepreneurial journey. SCORE is wonderful. That's, the Society of Retired Executives that can help you process, but you really want to get into a program that's going to take you through the nuts and bolts of launching a business so
Mm.
that you have that mindset, you know what you're looking for, that you're starting off with what's my minimum viable product,
Mhm.
getting feedback about that, then creating your value proposition. What's the problem you're solving? And for the people you're solving it for, who are they? And are they willing to pay money for your solution? And how to focus on that problem. It's always about the problem. It is never about your solution. Okay. So as you are solving that problem and really understanding that problem, then you're going to go into, well, what's the team? What's the talent acquisition I'm going to need? How much money is that going to take? And then if you have inventory and other type of assets, what does that look like? And so you really need mentors along the way, because the number two most important ingredient when you're starting a business is having someone to talk to. You have to be able to talk out loud. The person can just often just sit there and nod their heads. You have to get what you're up against. Oh my gosh, your fears, the roadblocks, the problems that are coming at you left and right. When you start talking them out loud and speaking them out loud, solutions will start formulating in your head. And when you're with a peer group of other founders, they can go, oh, I had that problem. This is what I did. And then that percolates a new way of you doing it for who you are. Yeah. So it's just a exciting time, but you have to have the props in place to
Mm.
help you so you can succeed. You are not expected to figure this out. If this is your first time doing it, oh, heck no.
Yeah, and beyond that, you actually need to be humble enough to have that beginner's mind to really go, this is new. This is not my background. I came up through corporate. That's not the same as being an entrepreneur.
Oh, one of my favorite stories were these two women out of a big uh, consumer product company. They had billion-dollar budgets and departments. So they were used to dealing with really big, hairy, audacious ideas and getting things done, but they had people, they had a whole system behind them, assets behind them. When they started their own business, oh my gosh, they were in their late 50s. It was super hard, the hardest thing they'd ever done. So I take your point as well taken, Jeanette.
Yeah. So is there in your mind a distinction between a founder's mindset and an entrepreneurial mindset?
No, that's the same. It's somebody who has an idea, again, a solution to a problem that
Yeah.
they want to solve, that some people will be willing to pay for it. It is just semantics, basically.
Okay.
Somebody who founds a business, an entrepreneur, they're all part of the same thing. It's just different words that we use.
Okay, good. I was just clarifying because I think for me, part of I hear founder as someone who is going to found a business, right? Like a business that scales and grows. And sometimes entrepreneurs may be solopreneurs, or they can tend to stay small, but that doesn't necessarily mean they do. Like Steve Jobs,
Oh,
entrepreneur.
yeah.
He
And
started,
and Gary Vaynerchuk talks about this a lot. You know, do you want to be happy in your Toyota Corolla or crying in your very fancy car? Here's the scope. You have to know what your goal is. And it could be feeding your family and maybe having a little extra generational wealth, right? Or your business could be feeding some folks in the community. You're employing some folks and building it, or you're into world domination and somewhere in between. It's
yeah,
really understanding that it is up to you to decide where you want to take it. Do not let someone say, oh, you have to scale if you're not into scaling. If you want to do enough that you are profitable and you're generating income for your family, wonderful. You are still valuable at 100,000 a year in revenue, very valuable, or 250,000 or 500,000, whatever. It's okay. Don't ever let somebody blame you, shame you, belittle you, and marginalize you because you aren't into scaling. You want to have a business that you feel good about.
yes. Even if that's a side hustle, so you have enough money to go to on vacation once a year.
Right.
Any of it is great, and all of it's a contribution. We're all making a
Yes.
difference.
And Jeanette, I always tell people you always win when you start a business, no matter what happens. If you start it, and highly likely it will fail, um, based on the data, you will learn two things. One, you're not an entrepreneur and you're ready to go be an intrapreneur, perhaps at a company, in which case you're going to go back working for someone. You're going to get paid more because you just went through the best personal and professional development program out there and you're more valuable. Or B, you are going to say, you know what? I learned a lot from that business and I did a lot of things wrong. Here's what I'm going to do with my next idea. Because most entrepreneurs have another idea or two or five or 10 percolating in the background.
Yeah, I can't drive into a town or a place, a new place, and not see, oh, this needs this kind of business here, or if I lived here, I would start that, or whatever. It's impossible. And that doesn't mean that if that's not your nature, you can't learn how to be an entrepreneur. It's a
Right.
skill set. Yes, it can be a predisposition, but it is also a skill set that needs to be learned. So I love your advice about going to an incubator. I've been doing business and startup for 40 years and helping people start up their businesses for 40 years. And I just registered to be part of an incubator program to help me with my pitch deck
Excellent.
plan and so forth, so that for this new venture, so that I can have the outside perspective and recheck my assumptions because I've been doing this for 40 years. I have ways of thinking that are not necessarily helpful and don't
That's
necessarily
right.
work. And so
You need a new set of eyes.
exactly. And it's always great to have more support, to be able to call on experts and get perspective. We don't have to be all things to all people, and we do need to know what we are not so that we can call that in to really balance out.
Exactly. And what you're going to love is that peer support.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
That's that level of community is wonderful. And I want to also just go back to address your thing about you're not born an entrepreneur. No, you're not. You're born with a certain level of tolerance for uncertainty.
Mhm.
That's what you're building a muscle for. Your resilience, your ability to get hit with no and have to remake and remake and retry and all the different recalibrations that you have to do as you pull together your value prop, your minimum viable product. And you can absolutely be trained. It's also same thing with your tolerance for uncertainty and all the pressures of being an entrepreneur. You can learn that. That is a muscle.
Yes, absolutely. And just like everyone else, we go through things in our lives that build that muscle for resilience, for
Right.
fortitude, for determination, or not, or it takes us out, right? But we choose which way we go with that. So you've been doing your podcast for a long time. What are some of the things that doing the podcast for a long time has taught you?
Well, I've had 6 podcasts.
Okay.
So to me, the most important thing is to set up a systems and procedures for the podcast. Set up your templates for onboarding a guest. Be consistent. If it's once a month, twice a month, or every week, you stick to that schedule. And how are you going to make that schedule easier? How do you going to onboard guests if you're interviewing, or if you're going to be just not just, but be talking about a topic? What are the topics for the first 8 weeks? Get all of that mapped out the first 8 episodes so that you can get past that hump that we can have as podcast hosts. Also, just start. I mean, for Don't Be Caged by Your Age, I did that on Canva, and I have no business being on Canva. I am spatially challenged, I am design challenged, but I knew that eventually I would be ready I'd know enough about the podcast to hire someone for the artwork.
Right.
So you don't have to be fancy schmancy. And frankly, if you look at all the artwork thumbnails for most people's podcasts, they're pretty ugly.
Yeah.
There's no design.
Well, and what's the biggest advantage? So, one of the things that I'm curious about is when you would advocate entrepreneurs use podcasts, what are they advantageous for?
Well, I think for a service industry, it's terrific. There's several things. For a service industry, if you want to be able to increase your brand awareness, get out in front of folks, it's a long tail game, meaning that's a 9 to 12 months before SEO starts picking it up. But boy, is it a great way for you to reach your target audience. The other thing is if you are entering a new industry that you really, frankly, don't know enough about, oh my gosh. So let's say you're building a tech business and you really, I mean, your idea is great and you've got to hire some people to help you out, but you really don't know people. It's one of the best ways to build your network, especially interviewing. People will say yes to a request to be on your podcast so much faster than taking a phone call. And what happens is you interview the experts in your industry, then you become an expert in your industry. You learn what what they've learned. You learn sound bites. You learn all this great information, and their connections become your connections. And then you're building your network, which is your net worth. Podcasting to me is the cheapest and easiest way to do it. Yes, you're going to probably put in 5 to 10 hours if you're doing it yourself a week.
Mhm.
And it's not about the downloads. It is about who's listening. So
Right.
if you get 5 great listeners and they're people who are going to sign up for your email list and you can, and get them in the funnel, wow. Or if it helps them buy your product or it helps them talk about your product. There's just so many reasons why podcasts are a great marketing tool. And you can also find ways, different ways, not just social media, but ways to advertise in somebody's newsletter, ways to reach people in a different way, to get the word out about your business, about your brand, and why you are uniquely qualified to do what you're doing. Because I always say to folks, walk down the bread aisle and you're going to see how many different brands, and you see new brands come up. We've got Dave's Killer Bread now, just taking over the bread shelf. We all have our unique. So it's the Seth Godin quote, which says, sure, it's been done before, but not by you and not for us. So now you develop your unique voice, your unique lane, even no matter how crowded the landscape is, you get to create your little way of bringing your brand promise to the world. And podcasting is a terrific way to do that.
Love that. So why did you start the New England podcasters group that you started? What was that about?
Thank you so much for asking, Jeanette. Well, community is so important when you're age. And as we talked about at the beginning of this episode, about how discerning we become, especially when time is your most valuable asset and currency, because you don't know what your expiration date is. It's who do I want to spend time with?
Yes.
And yes, I was heavily in the tech founder world and entrepreneurship world, but I will tell you honestly, the thing about founders in the world I was in is like, if you can't give them money or introduce them to somebody who's going to fund them, then get out of the way. And that's how they should be. They're very hyper focused on the business. And so there's not that reciprocity of community and building and relationships. And so I love podcasters. I think podcasters, whether they're doing it as a hobby or for their business or whatever reason, a passion, or they're a true crime, whatever, they are fascinating people and welcoming people. And I thought, wow, we don't have a group here in New England. We go to Podcast Movement and we go to Podfest and other things, but there's no like, how about if I set up like a monthly place where I could find community, right? Where I can find people I'm interested in talking. So it's very selfish of me on that end, but also it helps me deal with one of my biggest challenges which is what if I throw a party and no one shows up, right?
Well,
It's
the things that's so important as we get older is there's a lot of isolation. There's a loneliness epidemic going on right now. 1 in 4 people in North America say loneliness impacts their well-being. And of course, that's a little higher for older people and solopreneurs or small business owners because they tend to be
yes.
very isolated. So creating community is just downright smart. And people that you love. So remind me to tell you about the Podcasters Cruise if you don't know about that. A couple of friends of mine started that. I think the smartness behind creating community to be a community of interest, to be self-serving, and but also to serve others is
Yes.
super smart idea. And I love your approach to where you're at right now in life. Because I was asking you before the show, do you have a lead magnet in order for people to opt in? And you said, nope, I don't want to build my list. I am done with the business side of it. I want to do my podcast. I want to do my advocacy. I want to support my group. So talk a little bit about the mindset shift for you from being the founder and multiple serial business owner and exiting those and dealing with big numbers, etc., to no, it's perfectly fine for me to have this as my lifestyle and
Right.
my business now. So what did that take for you?
It just took an epiphany. And it was the spring of 2023. And I just thought, you know what? I'm out. I need to rethink all of this. And I actually did a podcast called Your Ink Story, which was interviewing people about their tattoos. Just 30 episodes, just because I was curious. I don't have tattoos, but I felt it really shared what we had in common while I thought about what I wanted to do next. And I thought, I want things to be easy. I don't want to work as hard. Listen to me whining. Um, and the thing is too, is once you've really had as many businesses as I've had, I don't need to start off with a monetization plan. Yes, I mean, if I were down to my last nickel, I would have to be probably working for somebody, but I have a little bit of a cushion. Podcasting is wicked cheap. Okay. It's maybe if you have all the bells and whistles and use all the tools, it might be $100 a month. So that's my time in. And then with the New England Podcasters Group, I knew I wanted to see what magic happens when you bring people together and yet have an opportunity for, you know, being seen myself and to hug people in real life in person. We
Mm.
do so many things virtually. We need more in-person connection because the side conversations and all the magic that happens when you're in person. And I thought, well, I've run enough events over the years. I know that sponsorship, people love your community. They want to sell to your community. They want to increase brand awareness to your community. There will be ways to monetize that going forward. I am going to let that all unfold as it should. I'm not going to get caught up in making it happen. I'm going to let things just unfold. And I know that sounds sort of a little spiritual woo woo, but for me, it was just like, let's just see what happens.
No, I love that. And the reason I love it is because I think it is certainly for that I've seen in myself, but I also really appreciate in people that I'm hanging out with now that are older and in many, many cases, not all, wiser, um, is that we have finally learned to stop spending so much time and energy proving and looking for approval. And now it's like, no, my value doesn't come from doing the hard things. I grew up my whole life thinking that's where my value came from, was surviving. So of course, then I had to set up everything to be a survival test.
Right.
Lord love it. That like I'm
Where I
happy to
so resonate with that.
happy to not have that belief anymore, and that we can think about it from the perspective of how can this be easy and joyful. And what I really hear in what you said, Andy, is that you're settling into the arms of trust rather than forcing and pushing, because that often comes from not trusting the
Right.
universe, trusting ourselves, trusting God, whatever it is,
Well,
trusting.
and my intention is community,
Yeah.
celebration, conversation, contribution. You bring all those C's together. Eventually, you're going to get to currency, cash, coin, right? But what I really wanted to feel was just this collaboration with folks. How do I do that without being an employee?
Yes. Yes, beautiful. And I think that's a wonderful kind of note to leave things on in terms of really thinking about what is the intention? What do you want to create? What is the feeling of that, the juiciness
Right.
of it? Because as you're talking, I can feel the juiciness in the language and in your energy around how that delights you versus how things before might have been interesting, fun, enlivening in some
Yeah.
ways, but there's a different kind of settling into those arms of trust that makes things so much, I think, richer. And it does also require trust and faith, and that's not always easy.
And also saying, oh, I shouldn't, no shoulds, right, for this time in our lives. And I watched so many people, and to this day, watch so many people have tremendous success in their 20s or 30s or 40s or 50s. I've waited my whole life and been prepared. I mean, if life had said, oh, don't worry, because when you get into your 60s, you're going to be all part of this part of this pro-aging movement and podcasting, and you're going to be doing all these great things. I kept looking at all these other people having all this great, successful outcomes at all those different ages going, wow, what's up with that? So I encourage people to stay open to the possibilities of and opportunities that can come when you're not judging it and you're not holding it up against what it should look like or is supposed to look like. And you're absolutely right. I could not have dreamed what I see now in just a small group of about 20 people. Different folks come because it's every month to the New England Podcasters Group, but 20 to 25 folks, different times each month. But I see the magic happening among them. And I just sit there and watch and go, that's so beautiful.
I love that. Well, so if people want to get to your podcast, where do they go? How do they find it?
You can find me in all the platforms, all the locations, YouTube if you want to watch me in action. Don't be caged by your age, but it's also Ande Lyons, ANDE LYONS. Just pop that into your Google search. You'll find me everywhere on all the platforms, and certainly on Apple and Spotify and Amazon Music. One of my favorite things is asking Alexa to play my podcast, or she'll let me know if the next episode is up. It's so much fun. But I would love, love, love to hear from folks and let me know how you're aging out loud. And I'd love to add wind to your sails anytime.
Beautiful, beautiful. And because Ande mentioned community, I do want to remind you that the Maturepreneur Network is here for you. You can go to maturepreneur.world and find out more about it. It is a low-cost, high-value community of people who are either clarifying what's next, getting going, or keeping going. And like she said, it is so much easier when we are in community and have people who get us, encouraging us to take that next leap. So maturepreneur.world, and please do check out Don't Be Caged by Your Age. As you can tell, it is a delightful conversation with someone who is both a fierce advocate and a great playful reminder that life is meant to be enjoyed. Yes. So, Ande, what's one last piece of advice you'd like to leave everyone with?
Oh, don't be caged by your age. You are here. There's so much more you have to give. So don't let those ageist beliefs prevent you from pursuing new dreams and opportunities. The world needs you until you take your last breath. We want you, and it's never over until it's over.
Mic drop. And thank you so much for being here. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Please share this episode because I want more people to hear Ande and be inspired by that notion that it is never too late. Bye for now, everybody. Thank you for listening. I'd love it if you left a comment and subscribed. And I encourage you to apply one aha from this interview right away so you can turn your wisdom into wealth and your contribution into positive change. Bye for now.